Cattle in feedlots are there for a simple reason: to meet market specifications and thus increase their value. To do this, they must achieve adequate daily weight gain over an allotted time on feed. The cornerstone of this process is nutrition, encompassing the growing or sourcing of appropriate feed crops, the processing and production of a balanced ration, and the preparation and presentation of the ration to the cattle. Just as important is to ensure the cattle have adequate supplies of clean water.
When we're looking at aromatic things to improve the starter ration, I like cereal hays or lucerne if you have the ability to purchase and secure that, ample sources of that. The big thing is, remember, these cattle can't see very well, but they can't smell very well. If we've ever noticed cattle looking in the bunk, they don't really look. They point their nose there. They can't really see because their eyes are on both sides of their head. So they'll use their nose trying to discern where's the most pleasant or flavorful place for them to consume feed in that bunk. Then they'll stick out their tongue and use it. You notice how close the nasal septum is to that feed as well as the tongue. Hence, they really can't see what they're eating. Hygiene is critical for both starter cattle and finisher cattle. This would demand, bunk hygiene would demand that the feed will be devoid of feed at some time during the day. The minimal activity of cattle is basically somewhere in late morning to early afternoon. That's when cattle traditionally ruminate or chew their cud, and this would be the time, basically the best period to call feed for the next 24-hour period, as well as to clean bunks. And we do these on my feedlots during this time, usually about 9 o'clock. We'll call our feed for the next 24-hour period as well as clean bunks. Hygiene is so important because cattle actually note their feed by aroma. Hence, any mold or excrement in the bunks, they're going to avoid that area as well as avoid consuming the feed.
Cattle like us like fresh feed. They don't like feed that's spoiled or aged or weathered. It's like us eating bread. We'll eat a lot more of it if it's fresh. The other thing is that decaying vegetable matter as well as decaying animal matter can actually lead to the growth of clostridial organisms, and the most risky of those would be Clostridium botulinum. So we can actually run into problems with the elaboration of botulinum toxin in decaying vegetable matter. So we have to keep these feed troughs nice and clean. Especially when it's hot and wet, we get feed spoilage very quickly. So it's a matter of working with the feed out staff to ensure we keep our feed troughs clean, because we don't want spoiled feed in the trough.
An important part of a stock handler's role is to monitor the consistency of faecal matter on the pen floor to ensure the cattle are receiving an appropriate ration.
We constantly, while we're doing the pen walk, we look at the milling of the feed. So we're likely to see acidosis where, particularly on a high grain diet, we have excessive fines from over-milling of the grain. So that's something that you have to work on with the feed mill to ensure that we're hitting our targets in terms of weights for steam flakes or the amount of number of fragments per grain, which will also change depending on the grain inclusion rate in the diet. Now, where we have high grain inclusion rates for tempered or dry rolled grain, we really don't want any more than 2 fragments per grain, or certainly with tempered grain where it's squashed and cracked into a large flake or simply a couple of fragments. That's the main thing we're looking for, but we can also run into problems with the processing of the roughage. Now, if the roughage is excessively short, it won't act as effective roughage and make the cattle chew and stimulate salivation, which buffers the development of acidic conditions in the rumen. If it's too long, the cattle have the opportunity to sieve through that and to pick through the ration and only eat the concentrates, and then you'll find acidosis in either case. I'll also have a look at the fecal consistency on the pen surface, and that'll adjust what we do with our feed milling. So for example, if you have a look at this pat here, it's certainly quite healthy. There's no signs of any hindgut fermentation. Quite the contrary, there's too much whole grain coming through. So we'll adjust our milling so that we get better grain utilisation. We're constantly working a tightrope between over-processing and causing acidosis, and under-processing and having too much whole grain come through.